Liar. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Monday, October 18th, 2021 or something like that. I believe we're still in the same year. Nothing has changed, right? Okay, good. No notes on my computer screen that say that, so I'm going to assume we're in the same timeline. No particular reason for my mentioning that. I didn't travel anywhere over the weekend. Anyway, the Kagro in the Morning radio show is live now by law, Bill says, now in the current timeline. Not saying anything, just... Anyway, by law, Kagro X, that's me, David Waldman, must present an opposing view, that's true, for the kids in Texas schools. So for all you kids listening in Texas, good morning, it's early, hope you make the bus. So, here it is, the Kagro in the Morning radio show is not live now. Some say this could actually be true. Right, hooray, the learning has been achieved. So, accomplishment unlocked, that's good. And we'll hear all about that, and we will also not hear all about that. I want to present both sides here and make sure we get everything, and also nothing. So fantastic. And also terrible. This is going to be a long day in school, and also a short night as well, I guess. And let's begin. It's time for the show to start. I pledge allegiance, and also don't pledge allegiance, to the flag of the United States of America, and also, I guess, maybe the Confederate States of America, or something, or Great Britain, for that matter. We never had the revolution after all. Okay, like I said, this is going to take a while, but also go quickly, some say. Anyway, I want to be sure we cover all the bases, and yes, so there's some news happening this morning. There was some news over the weekend as well. I guess, I'll wait for the big news roundup for Greg Dworkin to get here, because I see he's already winding up for that. And he was the one that alerted me to this morning's news, so I might as well just leave it for him to make the announcement. I can give you a roundup of what happened over the weekend in this house, anyway. Because the news, I didn't, who cares about that? There wasn't all that much happening over the weekend, as I recall, and not a super busy weekend, but a couple of stories that I rounded up and socked away, things we tweeted about over the weekend. Much of my Twitter weekend, I guess, what was it, Saturday? I guess this must have happened, occupied by an annoying presence in my timeline, and I figured out what my timeline was. Just happened to make an offhand comment about something that I thought was important it was important to me and to people who follow me, and I was playing off of the comment of popular Twitter figure, the Horse Whisperer, Horse, and, the strangest thing happened. I said something completely normal, and that set off an afternoon of the Horse Whisperer insisting that I was some sort of outrageous, I don't know what, thread hijacker is what he was angry about. And you know how it is with popular accounts, that set off a chain reaction of his followers tweeting me to just shut the F up and take the loss already, and, et cetera, and things that I could perhaps do with myself, in the privacy of my own home, perhaps, that might otherwise, get me arrested if I did them on the street, but I would be able to get away with at home, that might be better uses of my time, for instance. It was a very weird thing, and I couldn't really figure out what was making him so mad here, especially since the underlying substance of what we were talking about we were in agreement with. I guess he was perturbed in the slow, to his view, reaction to the non-cooperation of people like Steve Bannon with the January 6th committee subpoenas. And we had just finished explaining on Thursday and Friday how this was going to take a little bit of time, and that the Democrats on the committee here are going to want to be aggressive, but also make sure that they stay within traditional bounds in making this criminal referral and seeing the criminal referral prosecuted if they can. But that doesn't just instantaneously happen. And even when it's done aggressively, it takes a couple of days to make sure you're within bounds and in the right and can get the ball rolling. At any rate, I think what actually triggered the comment was that Joe Biden, who is actually president of the United States and not a member of the committee, was asked by a member of the press, and these things happen. I don't even know exactly what the question was, how it was worded, but basically asked, what do you think ought to happen here? And Joe Biden said, to everyone's astonishment, not really, but I mean, whatever. He said, well, I think that if you defy the subpoenas, you ought to be prosecuted for contempt, I guess. So I thought, that's actually the right answer. And it actually, I don't know, it somehow disturbed a lot of people who wanted to see, they would answer with like, well, show me action, not just words. Well, okay. I understand that. But of course, the president answering a question like that is a different thing than the DOJ answering a question like that. Anyway, his comment was something along the lines of, and this is right, he said, this is only happening. He's only having to answer this question, or there only is a question of what to do about this because, well, and he laid it here at, I was trying to lay it at Merrick Garland's feet, which, okay, he's Attorney General. That's not a bad spot to leave it. But saying this is only a question because the DOJ and Merrick Garland have, given us reason to doubt that they will quickly and aggressively prosecute these things. And I, took this and I said, all right, well, I will comment on this too. I took his tweet and did a quote tweet of it, which to me, this becomes important. It's meta. Delineates the discussions here. You could reply to the guy who tweeted it and have a discussion with him, or you can take the comment that they made and say, all right, well, in my own timeline, I'd like to have a discussion about this other small point, which at the time was, I just wanted to point out, counterpoint to whether or not this actually needed to be said at all is I think it does need to be said because most people in the world and in this country have no idea that congressional committees can even issue subpoenas, much less that you can be prosecuted for failing to respond to a committee that asks you to come and give testimony. But it's true, you can be. But there are many reasons why most people don't know that. One, most people don't care. Two, it's a relatively rare thing to have happen. And three, even when it does happen, it's relatively rare and almost non-existent for it to go to proceed to the point where there's a prosecution for contempt of Congress. So just pointing that out, like no one's ever really seen it. So we kind of do have to say it. And it's important for the President of the United States to say, I think there ought to be prosecutions. And, whether or not his Attorney General listens to him is a matter for, the independence of the DOJ among the executive branch, et cetera, et cetera. Lots of things to consider there. But it's important to know that most people don't know that, and it's important then for the president to say that he thinks there ought to be prosecution. Well, anyway, chain reaction was set off, and it then devolved into, how dare you come into my timeline and tell me you want to change the subject? And it went on for, an hour or two. And then that's when we started to get all the fun things like people saying, oh, yeah, well, you're dumb. And then other people tweeting like the Leonardo DiCaprio gif from, I guess, The Great Gatsby, toasting that awesome roast, etc. This went on for a couple hours. And then, anyway, long story longer, we now have, I guess the rest of the weekend was spent with the horse whisperer apologizing to me because he realized, oh, that thing I accused you of doing, coming into my timeline and hijacking it, I was completely wrong about. Never mind the substance of the thing. I just misread things, and then I set off a chain reaction and had 500 people tell you were a jackass. Sorry about that. So that was a fun Twitter weekend. Anyway, that weekend is over, and Greg Dworkin is here, and he has news. I just thought I'd warm people up with stuff from the home front. That's how my weekend went, and now I'm going to check out the news. Good morning, Greg. If you even want to stay at this point. But I don't hear you. That's worse. How about that? Maybe he's been trying to interrupt me this whole time, and it hasn't been working. I tested Skype this morning. You want to give me a call back, Greg, and see if the connection works a little better next time? Or are you in the middle of the news and I don't even know it? All right, we'll try that. I will make the executive decision. Or maybe I'll call Greg. How about that? We haven't tried that one yet. Should I give it a shot? Does he know he's disconnected? I don't know. I'll try it. Some ringy dingies for the record.
How's that? Is that better?
Yes, this is better. I like it when I can hear.
Oh, good.
Okay. Did you already do the news?
I had to change some settings on my sound. One of my programs turned off my microphone for reasons that are obscure.
Well,
and important. But, I don't want to hijack your commentary about my microphone. I want to hijack your commentary about your commentary.
Yes, please. This commentary, all, no one cares anymore.
The interesting thing to me, which is a minor point that has nothing to do with what you said, and I hope your followers don't give me a hard time about,
is
that the reaction to Joe Biden commenting on, Bannon's a crook and he ought to be hung, is that the Justice Department got real upset about Biden interfering with justice.
That's their prerogative.
I wasn't reading the people who said, oh, yeah, and he's going too slow. I read, oh, and he shouldn't have said anything.
Yeah, there was that.
Show you can't win if you say anything, and that's why a lot of people don't say anything.
Yeah, I mean, it's true that traditionally a president would say, well, I don't think I should comment on anything under investigation. I'll let the committee do its work. True. But this is a good sign.
Had the best, approach to all of this.
Good.
Right. I don't know if you caught that, but
no.
She was asked if she was concerned about starting precedents about, allowing executive privilege to be waived in the case of Trump. And Psaki said to the Fox News guy, who always asks the same question, something along the lines of, well, I'm not worried that Joe Biden would start an insurrection. So, no, that doesn't concern me.
Yeah, that's the big difference here, right? You're investigating an insurrection. So, things are going to be a little bit different. Privileges are going to be waived.
And the other funny thing about Twitter, the way Twitter works, is that people will say something, and maybe it's controversial, maybe it's not, but it's their opinion.
Yeah.
And they have the timelines open for comments.
Yes.
So you might comment on it. This has happened to me for somebody relatively famous, so I won't mention names.
Oh, okay. Whoops,
and you mention something slightly different or a slightly different focus, and they come back to you and say, I didn't ask for your opinion.
Right.
And then their followers start piling on.
Take
the loss. What loss? This isn't the game. I didn't know this was sports.
I know.
I had an opinion. I said something. You don't want me to comment? I won't. No big deal. I got other things to do.
Just stop now. Stop digging. Seek help. All sorts of things.
Yeah, exactly. So it's okay, fine. I'm muting this conversation because it's not going anywhere.
Well, anyway, I
usually
get the
it's not worth adding to because it just doesn't go anywhere.
Right.
And, come back to it tomorrow if you really think you have something interesting to say. I will have already forgotten it, and I won't remember I muted it, and I won't see it, and I'm okay with that.
Right. Well, that was kind of what the conclusion was. There was this temptation briefly to say, well, for all the people who sent and retweeted these, seek help thing. Well, I did get some help, but the guy you are supposedly backing up came back and said, oh my gosh, I was completely wrong about that. I'm really sorry. Would you like to read that? But, they're long gone, so who cares? So don't bother with that. And, anyway, now I guess everything's fine, but it's still muted, so I guess.
We're good.
Yeah. All right.
So
that's the day.
Colin Powell died. That's a lot worse than somebody saying bad things about you on Twitter.
Right. Definitely final. You can't, it's not like something you can unmute later.
Right. And people are sharing all sorts of things about Colin Powell because that's what happens when somebody dies and you're famous.
Yes.
And
that'll be that
some
kind
people,
of morning.
are lauding him for his experience and statesman-like
right. I see people doing this.
Progression as a black man through the contours of a system that doesn't necessarily favor folks who don't look like everybody else.
Yes, it's one of those white systems.
Some people are mad at him because of his UN comments about Iraq during the W administration.
Right, that stinks. Don't say those things.
But Liberal Ted quoted a thing that Colin Powell said and mentioned that this is one of the best things he remembers about him saying.
Oh, all right.
And this was when Colin Powell was on Meet the Press at some point. Okay?
What a show. Yeah.
And it was referencing the Barack Obama, John McCain election. And you may recall a woman came up to John McCain and said, I can't vote for Obama or something along the words of this line. He's an Arab.
Oh, yes, right.
And McCain said, no, ma'am, he's not. He's a good American. and moved on. And Powell's version of the story basically is like, so this happened, and people have been accusing Barack Obama of being a Muslim. And the correct answer, he said, which people give, is no, he's actually a Christian, and, let's move on. But the right answer, Powell said, is, what if he is?
Right.
What is wrong with running for president if you're a Muslim? Why can't a 7-year-old Muslim boy think that he can grow up to be president of the United States?
I know. I should play some
And it was a great
dramatic
comment.
music.
And in context now, even greater.
Yeah. Because there are still people who say that. They did not learn the lesson that Colin Powell attempted to impart to them.
Right. And actually, W attempted to impart at the time. You may recall he had a very prominent visit to a mosque right after 9/11. And the anti-Muslim sentiment at the time in his own party, and Powell referenced his own party.
Yes.
As in that McCain comment at a McCain rally, was tamped down at the time. But W went to a mosque and said, we are all in this together. We're not mad at Muslims. We're mad at Al-Qaeda.
Right.
And things have morphed since then.
Yes.
And so that's an era that's...
that party has morphed since then.
That's an era that's dead and gone, just like Colin Powell.
Yeah, it is now. But a lot of people are recalling their various thoughts about him. Very interesting. I was kind of shocked to see that it was a matter of COVID-related illness, I guess was how it was put, complications from COVID.
Complications due to COVID. Now, Powell was 84.
Most high-profile loss, I think.
And I felt obligated to send around the most recent graph from CDC correlating the death risk.
This is important.
For COVID by age and vaccination status.
Yeah.
And it turns out
vaccinated.
that age is the thing that makes COVID dangerous.
Yes.
Right? If you're under 12,
still the biggest
it's
risk.
Pretty rare you die from COVID. And if you're over 80, it's pretty common.
Mm-hmm. And he was.
And it's pretty common whether you're vaccinated or not. It makes a huge difference. I mean, you're talking about incidents per 100,000 population. If you're unvaccinated and over 80, you're talking about 70 per 100,000 population during peak. And if you're vaccinated, that drops to below 20. In fact, a vaccinated 80-year-old, 85-year-old has about the same risk as an unvaccinated 50-year-old. And we know about unvaccinated 50-year-olds. They're the ones who are apologizing in ICUs and saying,
Yes.
I wish I would have gotten my vax before I died.
Right.
So we know
Like
that
Twitter.
50-year-olds can get COVID and die. And 80-year-olds who get vaccinated have the same risk. I mean, the older you are, the more vulnerable you are. And, pre-existing conditions, and the more old you get, the older you get, the more pre-existing conditions you have. I don't know. I'm not Bill Frist, and I don't know what his medical conditions were, if any.
In your life. Yeah.
But age alone is a major risk factor. And being vaccinated lowers that risk tremendously, which is why people get vaccinated. But these vaccines do not make you COVID-proof. They never were supposed to. Nobody ever said they did. And so when people say, well, you got vaccinated and you got COVID, that doesn't prove anything. Well, it proves the vaccines don't work. Actually, it doesn't. If you look at the data, it proves that they do. It's just that they don't make you vaccine-proof. And in fact, that conflates the vaccines help to decrease risk for hospitalization and death, but do not drive it to zero. And that gets mixed up with, well, the vaccines are supposed to stop you from not getting COVID. Well, they aren't. They never were. Nobody said that they would. We have data to suggest that it helps to prevent infection, and Americans care about that, and that's why they're so into boosters, even if the CDC and FDA says, well, you're not quite needing it because hospitalization and death is something different. And the public says, we know hospitalization and death are something different, but getting the infection is the different thing that we are concerned about because we're not worried about being in the hospital. The hospital is for those people who are apologizing for not getting the vaccine before they die. That's got nothing to do with me. I want to not get the infection. I want my booster.
Right.
And so that's the current discussion we're having now, which, I hope our listeners were set up for months ago because we've been talking about this for a long time.
Yeah, I think everybody here understands it. Now you have to go out and explain it to, I don't know, let's say 15 friends. I would ordinarily say 2, but You might as well get right to it. Explain it to as many people as possible.
Well, it's difficult to explain because if you explain this, they turn to you and say, well, you're wrong. Just take the loss.
Right. That's right. Why don't you just...
Because if you say just take the loss, that guarantees that you've won, you see.
Yes. Oh, and by the way...
You probably didn't know that, but there's like a little, asterisk that says, if you say this, that means you won the argument.
Yeah, right. Look, here's a gift that says you lost. It's amazing. So, it's in pictures, so it must be true. Well, we've always known this to be the case, even when they were telling us about how the vaccine's doing. Right. Yes, I quit Twitter from here on in. The vaccine was always sold as what, 90-something% effective?
Yeah, that means 10% other.
Right. You know how it is with the chance of rain. All right. Well, anyway. Yeah, so now everybody reminiscing about Colin Powell and or the things that Colin Powell make them think about when they heard that he died. And a lot of mixed feelings and then a lot of raw feelings out there because people who have one way of feeling about it don't want to hear about the mixed feelings of other people. Right. So they're hijacking their timelines or something. Which
is an interesting segue into a very interesting article for some interesting people that I read the other day.
That is interesting.
And, that's all we need to know. I have good friends who are retired risk communicators, Peter Sandman and Joe Linard. And they've worked for various and sundry people, from corporations to CDC to WHO. They do risk communication. And they had a very short, blessedly short piece on which I included in the Pundit Roundup. And, of course, I'll give you the URL so you could read along.
I will.
About mandatory COVID vaccinations, which all the data says is working just fine.
Working great.
If you take the corporations who mandated it and put them all together, you basically get 0.5% people quit, and the rest get vaccinated. And so, if your success is predicated on whether or not the vaccines are given and people stick with the place they work in order to get them, then they're very successful.
I guess so. That's a small number of people.
Right. I mean, so it's pretty clear. I mean, it's not even debatable anymore.
Okay.
But that's not the approach they take. They take a very interesting, a slightly different approach, which, of course, would get them thrown off of Twitter.
All right.
Millions of people clearly disagree with us, they say. All right, if you're starting off with that, all right, well, you're inviting me to disagree. But we believe that getting a COVID-19 vaccine is a no-brainer.
Okay, well.
Putting aside some pretty rare medical contraindications, we don't know of anybody who's eligible to get vaccinated who isn't better off getting vaccinated. Now, whether COVID vaccine mandates are wise is a closer call. Now, the case for COVID vaccine mandates is simple and persuasive. And remember, as risk communicators, what you're trying to do is persuade, not be right. Big difference between a pundit and a risk communicator.
Yes.
Right? A pundit has to be right, and when they're wrong, they just ignore what they said and keep moving on. And a risk communicator is trying to persuade you to come around to accepting a piece of information they're trying to provide. So the case for COVID vaccine mandates is simple and persuasive, they write. It's a two-step
simple and finite
proposition. Lots of people who decline to get vaccinated voluntarily roll up their sleeves when they're told they have to.
Okay.
Right? An increased vaccine uptake is a worthwhile goal. And so, on balance, it's great.
All right.
They write, in our judgment, that's a strong case, far stronger than the argument for mandatory flu vaccination, for example. And that's of interest to me because I was very much involved in mandatory flu vaccinations at my healthcare facility. And we decided not to make it mandatory, but persuade people to do it. And if you do it, we won't make it mandatory. And that worked great. And that was thanks to the very strong nursing union that worked with us.
Okay.
Right? But they also make the case against COVID vaccine mandates. It's longer and it's more complex, and it's a list of arguments. And here's 5.
Okay.
1. Mandatory vaccination is a clear infringement on freedom and bodily integrity.
Yeah, well.
My body, myself, abortion rights comparison isn't perfect, but it's not completely off base either. Number 2, the actual harm done by voluntary unvaccinated individuals is mostly to other voluntary unvaccinated individuals. So what do you care?
Yeah, there's a little bit of that.
Number 3, when people are coerced into doing something they greatly prefer not to, the outrage is bad for society. Number 4, the outrage aroused by coercion tends to increase people's cognitive opposition to whatever they're being forced to do. And that's why, for example, you can look and see that Republicans are now leery of the idea of mandatory vaccination for children for measles and mumps and other things. And number
Yes,
5, the fact that
great.
vaccine uptake is strongly correlated with political views means that most of the people forced to get vaccinated see themselves as being forced by the other, so that just makes them dig in.
Oh, yes. Okay.
And in their judgment, those are strong cases. Now, the pro-mandate people may have a stronger case, but you should make the stronger case.
Please make it.
Right? If you acknowledge your opponent's case is strong, some of them might be open to the argument your case is even stronger. We call this even though risk communication. Even though vaccine mandates are a huge blow to personal freedom, it's much better than you do for the following reasons. Even though vaccine mandates are a huge step toward ending the pandemic, what's more important right now, sadly, is that they're also a huge and unacceptable blow to personal freedom, but they help end the pandemic, so we have to do it anyway. So in other words, concede the merits of the other side's case before you build your own stronger argument, and you'll have a much better chance of persuading somebody.
Right.
Acknowledge that they have a legitimate point of view, and don't start out by saying, look, you're a stupid idiot who believes lies. Let me explain to you why I'm right. That has a much lower chance of persuading somebody.
Okay, wait a minute. Let me make a note of that. No,
So write that down.
stupid
Do not tell people they're stupid and
idiots.
believe lies.
I got to delete that from my calendar. Hold on.
You got to
Yes.
delete your Twitter account.
Yeah, right. Oh. Well, anyway, I had scheduled for right about this time telling somebody that they were a stupid idiot on Twitter.
No.
So-
Take that off. Leave it for
Okay.
next week.
All right. Well, I'll tell you what. During the break, I'll go and clean that out. I had like a whole day blocked out. For
Right.
that.
So if you want to persuade, and not everybody does,
Yes.
then if you want to persuade, keep that in mind. And if you don't, have at it, but don't be surprised if somebody yells at you for saying something on Twitter.
That's right. I need to go take an L, I guess. That doesn't sound good at all. But anyway, we'll be right back after 2 minutes after my next loss and move on to the next one. Hi, it's me, David Waldman, the same guy who was just talking to you a second ago. Our Patreon subscription drive is still going strong, with over 175 monthly donors who help keep us on the air. If we've helped keep you going during the pandemic, why not return the favor and help us keep going so we can all be together for the next disaster? Patreon.com, Patreon.com, makes it easy to make secure, recurring monthly contributions to support our show. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. Maybe you'd like to thank us for keeping you sane during the Trump era. Maybe you're looking forward to in-depth explanations of what's going on in the Biden administration. Whatever it is that keeps you listening, we need your help to keep bringing it to you. And hey, if you happen to prefer using PayPal or even the Square Cash app, we're up and running with those options too. Thanks again, everyone, for all your support. We literally could not do this without you. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Okay. You are not a stupid idiot person I was talking to over the Twitters. There you go. So just in case you thought that was going to happen.
Okay, good.
I'm not doing it. I learned something in the last segment. We were on risk communication. Are we still there?
No, well, the data about mandates working is actually pretty strong. Pretty strong.
Can't say that
Here we
word.
go. I can unequivocally say it was the best decision we ever made, said the Houston Methodist Texas CEO in implementing a vaccine requirement, for example.
Interesting.
Vaccine mandates
Good
stoked
review.
fears of labor shortages, says this Washington Post article in my roundup, but hospitals say they're working.
No, it's my roundup. Get out. There.
That's because hospitals say they're working. Comments are turned on. It's an open
Okay.
thread.
Good.
How dare you say this in an open thread?
Wait, no, I apologize. Okay.
Right? I'm going to make it a closed thread. Well, actually, I can't, and I don't want to.
Oh.
So you're welcome to say whatever you want.
Right
Vaccine
on.
mandates stoked fears of labor shortages, but hospitals say they're working, and they give multiple examples. And again, I mentioned the 0.5% because that has been, calculated.
Yes.
Jonathan Reiner, MD, writes, we're starting to get a sense of how many people in big organizations will give up their job when faced with a vaccine mandate from United Airlines, UA, New York Presbyterian, NYU Langone. The number is consistent, 0.5%.
Okay. Well,
New York University Langone said
That
it
settles it.
terminated 75 employees of its 40,000 person workforce.
wow. That's less than are even getting COVID in the regular population.
Right.
Okay.
So awfully interesting. The other thing, of course, Professor Gavin Yamey, MD, MPH, also tweets, reinfection can reasonably happen in 3 months or less, says Jeffrey Townsend, the study's lead author of this new piece. Therefore, those who have been naturally infected should get vaccinated. Previous infection alone can offer very little long-term protection against subsequent infections. That's still a debatable proposition, a debatable position, but one that should be discussed more often because don't forget last week, FDA advisory committee to FDA, which still has to move on it, talked about J&J and Moderna boosters. And this week, they'll talk about vaccines for younger kids. And CDC this week will talk about boosters. And so maybe by the end of this week or the beginning of next week, actual Moderna and J&J boosters might start to be available. The interesting thing about the J&J situation is that, Tony Fauci was on the talking head shows over the weekend and said, basically, look, J&J, you got to think of the 2 shots as like your original vaccination,
Okay.
So, now that we have more data, it seems clear that 2 are better than 1. And so I don't even know if he called J&J a booster. And that's interesting because the better approach, according to preliminary data that doesn't prove the point, still might be to get J&J plus an mRNA.
Yeah, okay.
Because that's a story with AstraZeneca, similar to J&J situation. So, it's an evolving situation, and the fact that people don't know what's going on when you don't have all the data means that that's the time that you're supposed to be arguing most passionately about your position, whatever the heck that position is.
Okay, I guess.
And that's why you see so many arguments. When everybody agrees, there's no argument. People aren't arguing about the timing of flu shots.
No? Okay.
We know that. It's pretty accepted. This is what it should be. But, this stuff is all new. And when it's all new, you can say, well, the data suggests we do this. And then 6 months later, well, we have different data that says we should do that. Well, you lied. No, yes, right. It wasn't a lie.
Like the 5-year-olds. You lied when you said I could have ice cream. Well, I said you could have it after you eat your dinner. Oh, well, that too.
This situation.
I don't know what you're talking about.
7:30 in the morning.
Right.
You have to wait till 8 o'clock in this house before you get ice cream.
Right.
And you know the rules. They're published right there where you can't read them because you're only 3.
But nonetheless, I hold you responsible.
Well, wait a minute. What do you mean they're on the wall? Well, I say they are on the wall and you can't read, so who are you to say the rules aren't there? Just do what I tell you.
Yeah, well.
Kid.
My goodness.
You
people.
Anyway, so then interesting piece about vaccines from Politico. These Republicans torpedoed vaccine edicts and then slipped in the polls. New research shows governors in states without vaccine mandates, or where they've outright prohibited such a requirement, have significantly lower approval ratings.
Good, because
now, does that matter?
Sucks.
This whole thing about Trump telling people not to vote if you don't agree with him about the 2020 election, has been described various and sundry ways, including bad for Republicans, including a message to his party to get behind him or else, because he'll withhold his support and therefore you'll lose, or Trump predetermining his loss as being some sort of shenanigans that he can blame it on.
Yes.
But the fact of the matter is that I think what people forget is that one of the reasons 2016 was so shocking, and 2020 in terms of how many people voted, is that Trump was very good at mobilizing nutcase voters who don't normally vote to get into the electorate and vote for him, which they're entitled to do. I mean, it's their right. Everybody should get to vote.
Yeah, I'll see if I can change that, but okay.
But without Trump on the ballot, they may not be interested in voting for Republicans. So when he tells them that if it's not legit, you can stay home, Republicans are worried about that because they're not committed to the Republican Party in any way, shape, or form, and they may well stay home.
I hope they do.
And that's one of the reasons why the upcoming Virginia election is of such great interest. People aren't interested in the Virginia election because they just love Terry McAuliffe. He's just like the greatest thing, and everybody has their poster on as well. He's not that kind of candidate.
I know. Although I still do see a lot of this mistake.
And I don't like Rahm either. And so
Right.
don't send
believe
me
me.
notes about how could you say this in the middle of an election that you don't fully support. Look, he's Terry Mac,
Yeah, I mean, I'm sitting here in the middle of that election, and I'm watching the pundits say, there's a...
This is the unenthusiastic vote counts as much as an enthusiastic vote, and I'm enthusiastically going to
100%.
unenthusiastically vote for Terry McAuliffe.
Yeah, there's no
In fact,
doubt
they went and
about
they
it.
interviewed people
There's
and said, "Well,
enthusiasm.
why are you voting for McAuliffe?" Well, because Donald Trump,
Yeah.
his party,
They were so shocked.
and they were shocked. Right? You're not talking about transportation. Transportation wins elections in Virginia. Well, actually, it does.
Yeah.
True. I mean,
Yeah,
that's
it
a true
has.
statement.
But
But not
it will
this year.
later. Right. Yeah, absolutely. I was thinking, I don't remember being interviewed outside the Fairfax County government building, but it sounds like me, I do want to explain to these guys, I'm not at all thrilled about casting this ballot for Terry McAuliffe. I mean, he's all right-ish. My wife does not like him at all. But what are we going to do? Yeah. I'm enthusiastic. You're not going to catch me missing my opportunity to cast a ballot to deal the harshest defeat,
Right.
the
I mean, this is a
hardest blow
classic
to
people
Trump
vote
I
against.
can.
They don't vote for.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And,
I'm not voting for McAuliffe. I'm voting against Youngkin and the Republican Party and the insurrectionists, and I will enthusiastically do that. And if you want to call that an unenthusiastic vote for McAuliffe, what matters is that it counts just as much as anybody else's vote.
There's no discount for it, and that's all there is to it. Between that and people who are here, some saying the insurrection, some saying Trump, but there's also a ton of people out there like, Youngkin is going to kill us all with this COVID. We're tired of this. We've been masking. We got vaccinated. We're doing all the right things. We have a governor that believes in science. And you're actually asking us to take a huge step backwards. I'll vote for anybody who isn't that.
Also abortion, which is a big deal.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And that's on the Democratic side. Well, yes, but Terry McAuliffe said something I didn't like.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, and I'll take him to
Donald
task
Trump
for it
said
later.
something
Goodbye.
that people didn't like, and people still voted for him. Why is that like all of a sudden? But if a Democrat does it.
Yep. Well, so far it's not working, and most people are recognizing, and maybe more so around here in Northern Virginia, where all the votes are. That's fine if people are coming to the realization of, I don't particularly love who I'm voting for. It doesn't matter. I'm doing it, and I wouldn't miss it for the world. Right. There you go.
And so
That's
let's say, for the sake of argument, McAuliffe wins by, 4 points, 5 points.
Yeah. Disaster somehow.
Well, it's 3 point would be a disaster. And 5 point would be, let's move on. It's obvious that he was going to do that.
Youngkin did it to himself. It was his race to win.
Right. And a 9 point Northam-style win would be a shocker that the next day would be, okay, well, let's just move on. It's obviously, one of those situations that you can't really make anything out of.
Right. This is different, and you can't run your race like he did here in this.
Yeah,
belt.
or like Gavin Newsom did.
Right.
But I'm not going to prejudge
Virginia
the
and
race.
California
Let's
are
just see what it
identical.
is. It's coming up in a couple of weeks. I don't know who's going to win. It's a close race. McAuliffe has had like a 3 point lead for months now. And so I don't know who's going to win, but McAuliffe has to be slightly favored. It's a close race. Anybody could win. It wouldn't be completely shocking if Youngkin won, but I'd be a little bit surprised because I expect McAuliffe to win by, a small amount. So we'll see what happens.
Right. And if it doesn't work, I guess we audit it for 15 years. Can I do that? I understand.
No,
it's
you're
possible
a
for me to
Democrat. You can't do that.
All right. Well, certain options not available to me. That I'm going to cross that off because
But
just this morning
if
said
Youngkin
no death
loses,
threats.
it's because Republican voters didn't come out the way they would for Donald Trump.
Yeah, like at all, which would be terrific.
Which would be notable. And so that's why Trump telling his people, if you don't, and so in other words, what Trump has done with the nutty rally where you had to pledge allegiance to the insurrectionist flag and his other comments that Youngkin can't win unless he's total MAGA is Youngkin tries, as all Virginia Republicans do, except Corey Stewart, if they try to run a race that says, look, MAGA people, wink, wink, I'm with you. I'll go on Seb Gorka's show.
They don't like the wink, wink.
And
so much.
moderates, look at me. I'm a businessman, suit and tie. I'm not crazy. I'm low key. You can vote for me. I'm not scary. And so you try to get both groups to vote for you. And if you can do that and hold that coalition together, which is inherently unstable, then you have a much better chance of winning. And I was ranting the other day. I don't understand why people don't recognize that this is inherently unstable and that you probably can't do that with a semi-competent opponent. And McAuliffe is pounding Youngkin on that wacko rally and the fact that Trump supports him. And that's going to get out Democratic votes. So when you go and interview these people and say, well, I'm really surprised because nobody voting for McAuliffe really says they're for transportation and schools, the things that really generally determine Virginia. They're all mentioning Trump, and Trump isn't even on the ballot. I don't understand it. Well, okay. Well, if you don't understand it, maybe you shouldn't be a pundit.
I guess, or you're a pundit that lives in Maryland, I guess, because I don't know what's going on. Pundits that live in Virginia seem to get it. It's not like Larry Sabato is missing this.
Right, exactly.
And he's, we
no,
all
Larry
like to see
Sabato is
it
more
when he
upset
misses
about
things.
the fact that it took 2 weeks for him to get his mail-in ballot.
Ah, yes.
He finally got it, though, and I asked him, you going to hand deliver it now? He said, oh, absolutely.
Right.
Big capital letters.
And then they'll audit and say, no drop boxes, can't have them. And yeah. All right. Well, all these, we'll see whether Youngkin can, without Trump on the ballot, motivate the people who usually don't come out to vote the way Trump did. I wonder if there's a way to keep them at home. I was thinking.
Well, Trump telling them to stay at home, I think, is a wonderful thing.
Oh, well, that helps. Yeah, I was hoping to reinforce that maybe by saying Trump wants to reward you for your loyalty with a free Domino's pizza. But I can't, the logistics of scheduling it is, we don't know when it's going to come. No, it's going to come on Tuesday, but make sure you're home to accept the delivery or you'll miss your free Trump pizza. Right. Sometime between 8 a.m., 7 a.m. and 7 p.m.
Well, don't mention pizza because pizza, tends to get them all riled up. And
oh, yes. Oh, right. Oh, yes. It's not pizza.
It's not pizza.
Something else.
Right, it's donuts.
Wink, wink. But, they're all in on that. So. Right.
So the focus of the pundit roundup actually was the contours of Manchin's ask coming into focus.
Manchin's what?
Manchin has an ask.
I see.
A-S-K. He asks
at last.
for things.
Okay.
He at last has an ask. Tourist next to his name.
He
has
shake
an ask,
that
and
ask
the ask
so that
is
we can all see it.
That he wants you to spend less money on ending poverty, and he doesn't want clean energy. And if you give him these things, he'll vote for you. And it's not quite as bad as it sounds. This is from Axios Scoop, Manchin's Red Lines.
Sounds bad. Yeah.
Okay. Manchin and Sinema held a call with House centrist lawmakers last Wednesday in which the senators detailed some of the specific concerns about Biden's $3.5 trillion social spending plan. That sentence in alone is of interest because they're finally getting specific. And once you get specific, you can start negotiating.
Yeah.
They also discussed the White House's decision to link the package to approval of the infrastructure bill, which they're not happy about, but they'll live with it as long as it goes first. Neither Manchin nor Sinema endorsed Biden's compromise price in the 1.9 to 2.2, so they're still holding out on that. And Manchin also continues to privately tell colleagues the president's Clean Energy Performance Program, a cornerstone of Democrats' plan to achieve zero-carbon electricity, is a non-starter.
Oh, no.
Now, in addition to the pared-back child tax credit, Manchin's open to Biden's $450 billion plan to subsidize daycare and offer free universal preschool, which, by the way, happens in West Virginia now. Manchin wants to impose stricter income caps on the daycare subsidies. That's, subject to negotiation. He's not that interested in family leave or elderly care, and that's fine. That's stuff you can negotiate with as well.
He's going to need that. Okay.
But he's getting specific, and when you get specific, you can start to do some horse trading. So the fact that you haven't heard a lot about this publicly until now is a positive sign to me, and I think that there's progress being made. Now, what comes out of it, I think there'll be things that people are unhappy about, but there may be other ways to get to the same place. It's like reconciliation when you want to do something and you can't get it because the parliamentarian says you can't, and the Senate majority leader decides that they don't have the votes to overturn the parliamentarian, and therefore, based on that, the parliamentarian is right.
Yeah,
and so you don't do it. And that doesn't mean it can't get done some other way. It just means you don't do it right at that time. And there'll be things in this that progressives will find doesn't get done, and they'll be disappointed. But the fact of the matter is that if you're a party which is running on, we are competent, we get stuff done, we're back to traditional governance, and traditional governance is good, we're not into insurrection, then you have to produce. And so the very fact that there's movement on this is a good thing, even though the results will obviously and clearly disappoint some. They will. They have to. You can't get something through this Congress with a 50-50 Senate and not disappoint somebody.
Sure.
It's impossible.
Even if you got what you asked for, you can then say, I should ask for more.
Right.
So, okay.
So,
no problem with that.
My friend on Twitter, Amanda Marcotte, tweeted some very uncomplimentary things about Kirsten Sinema. And then noted, but it is a sign of social progress in one aspect. It used to be that somebody this, whatever, uncomplimentary thing, insert, had to be male to get so far in politics.
That's true. So, big win for the women.
Big win. Yeah, and big win for the women, I suppose. But of interest.
Yes.
And, she's not wrong.
Look at what thing she said, but okay.
She's not wrong.
All right. Well, it's good not to be wrong. Or not that we shouldn't just yell, get off of Twitter, take the L.
Yeah, exactly right. So there's that. So that is happening. And
all right.
Let's see what else is happening. Josh Marshall noted it's just fascinating to him that the insider cheat sheet, which is basically Axios, the insider sheet cheerleading for Manchin is one of the most fascinating dimensions of this saga. Because whatever happens, they're like on Manchin's side about it.
Yeah.
Which, to me tells me, well, Manchin's probably their source.
Yeah. Well, right. And
that's how these things work. Why is this particular publication seeming to take sides? Well, it's probably because their information is coming from that side.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there are other people with information who would talk to them. I don't know why they don't call them. But I don't know. They're not quotable. They don't have, I don't know. So
to follow up on that, and I have that in the pundit roundup, one from the New York Times, Biden's plans raise questions about what the U.S. can or cannot afford to do.
There's nothing we can't afford to do.
Well, if you don't pay for it, you can't afford it. If you pay for it, you can. And you don't have to balance the budget to pay for it. You just have to pay for it. Democrats are debating whether doing nothing will cost more than doing something to deal with climate change, education, childcare, prescription drugs, and more. Can a country already running huge deficits afford the scope of spending, or can it afford to wait large social, environmental, and economic problems that will accrue costs for years to come? It's a stealth battle over the fiscal future at a time when few lawmakers in either party have prioritized addressing debt and deficits. Well, if they're not prioritizing debt and deficits, probably a reason for that. That's because you really don't have to. And it's a stupid thing to assume, like the New York Times does, that it's central and you must. Actually, you don't. See John Maynard Keynes. Each side believes its approach would put the nation's finances on a more sustainable path by generating the strongest, most durable economic growth possible. And that's true. A lot of these arguments are based on, I think my side and my idea is a better way to establish economic growth and sustainable and stable base for doing stuff. So, there's common ground there. That's that, argument about mandating vaccines only on politics. Okay, we accept that you think that that's correct and that we're not saying, well, that you're stupid and believing lies. We're not taking that approach. We agree that that's where you're coming from. Let's sit down and negotiate on what you think we can afford and what we think we need, and let's see where we can get. And that's where we're at.
Okay.
E.J. Dionne throws in, our system is biased against reform. Get used to it, Democrats. Manchin himself helped craft this, so why he wouldn't want it to die in a filibuster, would he? That's the infrastructure thing. But it's important to acknowledge another reality that goes beyond Manchin, Sinema, and the Democratic Party as a whole. Severe structural problems in our politics and institutions are making it far harder to solve problems and have productive debates over how to do so. So EJ comes back to the fact that the Senate being structured the way it is, it's very difficult to get anything done.
Yes.
If you're a House member, you've known that for years, even when you had a Democratic majority, or a Republican majority for that matter, because the Senate is just a weird institution that likes to talk and doesn't like to do things.
Yeah, I mean, that's the way it comes out.
They're the classic, when all is said and done, more is said than done. They just don't like doing things.
Yeah, very hard to move, and I don't know, he didn't have any recommendations, or, not that it matters at this point, you're just throwing
most of the Senate is over 97, so they should all get vaccinated and get their booster. That's my recommendation.
Yes, that's true, right? I mean, COVID could clean the place out if they weren't vaccinated, but I think most of them are. In the Senate, they're pretty good at the vaccination thing. There are still some people who insist they haven't been over in the House, but I think they're lying.
Yeah, well, no, you can't accuse people of lying. You just have to say you're mistaken. You forgot when you got vaccinated at CVS 15 minutes ago.
That's right. Yes, and you may have told some unverified information about your vaccination status.
In a press release.
Yes. I'm getting a call from the New York Times.
That you put your name on.
Yeah, but it's by no means a lie. Right. Yeah.
There's always a staffer who will take the fall for that, so don't worry about it.
Okay.
Anyway, that's my roundup for this Monday, trying to, get everybody up to speed on what happened over the weekend.
I think that does it.
Twitter and otherwise, but it's a shame about Colin Powell.
Yes.
But get your vaccine. This incident that happened to him does not prove vaccines don't work. It proves that 84-year-olds are vulnerable.
I guess so. So if you are one, get your booster.
Right. If you're 64, get one. If you're 34, get one.
If they're available.
And we'll be quite interested to see what FDA and CDC do this week and in the coming weeks. We're not going to have it all done by Halloween, but we should have pretty clear directions on what to do by Thanksgiving when people start getting together. So that's important.
Yes, that's becoming a topic of conversation again. And I did see the tyrant Fauci saying that vaccinated families could get together, so therefore tyranny. I'm not really sure why, but I don't know. They're really committed to that position. So don't take the L, you Republicans. You never L. All right. We're up to speed anyway. And, should be a good week or two for vaccine news. And,
yes, and for pundits who are never wrong, because they
them.
know exactly what's going to happen in the Virginia election. Mm-hmm. I've just been astounded by how many, what if McAuliffe loses? What does that mean to Democrats? Fine,
we'll
speculative pieces like that are what you get paid to write. But there are what does it mean to Youngkin and Republicans if Youngkin loses?
Right.
There were no articles about that.
Well, you will find that out when Youngkin loses and they go to diners here to talk to Youngkin supporters about how they feel. After he loses, it will still be Youngkin news all the time. If the Trump roadmap is any indication, and maybe it's not. Maybe they'll all just say.
Well, why don't we ask Corey Stewart what he thinks, or Ed Gillespie?
Yeah.
Let's meet Ed Gillespie in a diner and ask him about what he thinks.
Right.
But let's make that diner in West Virginia or Pennsylvania.
Please take it outside of this state. Take it away from me. All right. Well, okay, we'll keep an eye on these things, and let's see. Wednesday, we'll catch up on the latest. What has happened between now and then?
We shall see. Good. In any case, take care, stay out of trouble, and I'll interrupt you on Wednesday.
Okay.
As soon as I figure out how to turn my microphone on.
Yes. That's one of the prerequisites for participation on the show. Do work on that.
Yep. Alrighty. Take care.
Very good. Thank you. Do the same. We'll see you on Wednesday. What's this? This has to do with Virginia stuff. All the Virginia news is coming across my Twitter transom right now. But an interesting note, just reminder, Rachel Bidikofer just happened to be tweeting this. Not certain that it goes anywhere or just an observation that this is in the news. But Virginia's outgoing governor, Ralph Northam, has been living with long COVID for almost a year now. That's true. He got COVID early on in the pandemic. One of the other more high-profile cases, at least around here in Virginia anyway, that kind of caught everybody by surprise because he is a doctor. But, as governor, he had to kind of be out and about and having meetings with people all the time and couldn't couldn't do everything by Zoom and found himself exposed to COVID. And, that's a good point. Reminder that there is such a thing, long COVID. I don't need to remind this audience, I don't think, but this audience probably finds himself having to remind others every once in a while that when people say things like, well, the chances of my dying from COVID are blah, 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 so therefore I won't mask, vaccinate, abide by any rules at all, whatever it is. And you have to remind them, no, there's also all sorts of long-term implications that we don't know a great deal about. You know how you don't want to take the vaccine because we don't have enough data. We don't have a whole lot of data on what COVID does to you for the rest of your life. And actually, even quite honestly, short COVID sucks. People who have it and recover from it just fine and have no lingering after effects say it was terrible to be sick for this many days, whether they have it for a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, or they turn it around in 4 days. They get some monoclonal antibody treatment. And they still say, scary thing, not fun. Definitely, spent a day or two thinking, I don't know how well I'm going to be able to breathe in the next 5 minutes. So scary stuff. What does she have to say here about Northam, though? Dealing with COVID, long COVID for a year now, has been excellent on COVID management given the constraints of running a state in a nation managed by Trump and a radicalized and hapless GOP. Very interesting, and linking to a piece from the Virginian Pilot, the southeastern Virginia paper of record there, just sort of noting the fact that, he's done a terrific job in swimming against the tide when we had for a long time a national government dedicated to making the pandemic worse, and he had to fight to make it better in Virginia. And in addition, having a national focus on the race to succeed him, he wants to do everything he can to support McAuliffe's second election to office and join in showcasing how well Virginia has done with COVID when the national government for a long time made it so difficult. But imagine doing all of that and campaigning for the future of your state, one, while you're set for retirement and you're on your way out the door, and the temptation to do nothing has got to be very great, but two, doing it while still suffering with your long COVID. Your energy levels have got to be lapsing daily, and to get it together and get out there and fight for the future of your state when you're going to be putting it in someone else's hands has got to really be a challenge, and he's been up to it so far. So very interesting. We'll be right back. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Let's see. I got a couple of things to catch up on. Here's something interesting. This will give me an extra minute or two to think about which direction to take next. But let me set this up by heading back into my email to make sure I have this all right. But what were we talking about? You know what? Now I'm thinking about it. I don't remember why we were on this, but we must have been talking. Oh yeah, we must have been. Now I remember. When we were talking about the Texas schoolroom rules that they were debating in, I don't remember which school district it was, but you remember, there was the big story. NBC was reporting about the school administrator who was trying to straighten out for the teachers who were concerned about the new state law in Texas requiring this, requiring that we both side slavery, essentially. They're saying that I guess this was Texas's first bad, and then there was a second bad, and everyone afterwards will be bad stabs at banning critical race theory. This is their reaction to the whole critical race theory moral panic that's out there, and saying that you can't teach critical race theory in class. Okay, well, we're not, so that's easy to comply with, no problem. All right, well, another thing is you can't tell people, because we don't really know what critical race theory is, you can't tell people that white people are at fault for things, like including slavery. You need to be able to tell people, and this has been a weird undercurrent in teaching about slavery for a long time. We keep finding examples from around the country of people saying, well, on the one hand, you weren't free, but on the other hand, you got, some slave owners were nice to their slaves, and, I don't know why people they're motivated to say that. I don't know whether that's, the best motive I can give to that, and there's really no reason to attribute any good motive to it. But if you forced me and you said, I'm going to kill you if you can't come up with a good-ish sounding motive for saying something like that, and I say, well, I might be killed here, but maybe if you're teaching really young kids about this horrific concept, and they start to get crazy about it, and they're upset and they're crying. And I mean, I guess at that point you could say, well, no, I don't want everybody to cry about this. I mean, it's a sad thing. You should be sad about the fact that this happened, but not everybody had it quite so bad. You know, we still don't, there's really no excuse for saying some people treated their slaves really well. No, they were slaves. They're not treated well. You're owned as property. It doesn't matter if you got good shoes out of it or 3 square meals a day, you're a slave. So that doesn't really work. But you might say, you know, not every, I don't know, if you saw a video of slavery or you showed kids, I don't know, Roots or whatever, and I guess maybe if they're really young where they're crying about these things, you wouldn't be showing this. But if you get the idea that somebody says they're very upset about it, not every slave actually went through this thing that's making you cry. I mean, there was always the threat of that, which you should be crying about. I don't know. It's the only thing I can think of that could possibly, you know, but if your kids are older than 5 when you're teaching them, then just tell them the truth about it. Then there's no excuse for saying anything like that. But there's this weird mythology that, well, you know, some slave owners didn't, you know, whip every slave every minute of the day. So that's good. Not helpful. Anyway, to get back to where I wanted, you know, there was this crazy debate. I don't know how I got stuck on that. I guess I was just trying to imagine what would motivate somebody to keep saying that slavery wasn't all that bad. And couldn't come up with anything. So that was a waste of time. Anyway, we were talking about the way they need to balance things in the classroom in Texas, and they had such trouble articulating a real policy. And they had so much trouble, in fact, that one of the administrators blurted out that, well, just remember that if you're teaching about anything that is widely debated and currently controversial, that you want to cover both sides or have multiple perspectives on it so that we're not biasing the kids in any way. What sort of things are you talking about? Well, the Holocaust, for example, which was not widely debated or currently controversial, but it was very troublesome to find out that one administrator thought that it was, or was just so tongue-tied that they blurted that out. I don't know which was the cause of this, but either one of them is a problem. And we thought, okay, well, you know, now you got to do it with all sorts of topics. And then somebody said, maybe now it's time for, and I don't remember which one they named, but they maybe said the Church of Satan or the Satanists, and I don't know whether they put a specific brand of Satanism on it, can now send, you know, their materials to the Texas classrooms to make sure that you don't get just one perspective on Christianity, for instance, or religion in general. So, I don't know. That's, I think, how it came up. And I guess I was then, in saying so, questioning, maybe that was just it. Maybe, so who's going to send the materials? Would it be one of these? And is there any one authority speaking on behalf of the of Satanists? And then I was wondering, what sort of what sort of materials do they even have? Because there was the good versus evil part, right? The bill's author was saying, well, this doesn't apply in questions of good versus evil, which was so crazy. But anyway, then I was wondering, do you get materials like, would a Satanist's materials about religion be about evil is good? Or like, I knew nothing about Satanists, right? So anyway, that was what I wanted to get around to. This is how we got here. I got a note from constant listener, our constant in the most faithful sense, from John Ronald, who says, there really are different brands of Satanists. He's not a Satanist, but he's apparently aware of these things. And in fact, began telling me about the differences between there's 2 major organizations. And I don't know if there's a lot of splinter groups Satan-wise, and I guess it's okay. You can form your own. I don't know. But there's 2 big brands of Satanism. There's the Church of Satan, which I would have thought, okay, that's the chief organization. But there's also the Satanic Temple, which is a different thing. And it got a little weird. And so he said, I'll tell you what, I will record a minute or 2, 3, on on these two different brands of Satanism, just for everyone's edification. So now, of course, this will become a Satanist show. And if anyone were really paying attention to this, Fox News would be talking about how we're talking about how we should all become Satanists for some reason. I don't need anybody to become anything. I just thought this was interesting, that there were two branches of Satanism, where I thought one would do. But as it turns out, no. John, let's have your input, please.
So I realize that for David and for a lot of listeners, this is going to sound like People's Front of Judea versus Judean People's Front kind of squabble. But there actually is a difference between the Church of Satan and the Satanic Temple, TST. In short, the Church of Satan, founded by Anton LaVey, are a bunch of libertarians with they're kind of what people jokingly call dinner theater atheists, but they're mostly Ayn Rand plus weird rituals. Whereas the Satanic Temple is more of a civil rights organization fighting for reproductive freedom and separation of church and state. And they subscribe to some fundamental tenets. And I'll just read to you now the 7 fundamental tenets of the Satanic Temple. 1. One should strive to act with compassion and empathy toward all creatures in accordance with reason. 2. The struggle for justice is an ongoing and necessary pursuit that should prevail over laws and institutions. 3. One's body is inviolable, subject to one's will alone. 4. Freedoms of others should be respected, including the freedom to offend. To willfully and unjustly encroach upon the freedoms of another is to forego one's own. 5. Belief should conform to one's best scientific understanding of the world. One should take care never to distort scientific facts to fit one's beliefs. 6. People are fallible. If one makes a mistake, one should do one's best to rectify it and solve any harm that might have been caused. 7. Every tenet is a guiding principle designed to inspire nobility in thought and action. The spirit of compassion, wisdom, and justice should always prevail over the written or spoken word. Continuing to their mission statement, the mission of the Satanic Temple, a religious organization, is to encourage benevolence and empathy among all people, to reject tyrannical authority, advocate practical common sense, oppose injustice, and undertake noble pursuits. The Satanic Temple has publicly confronted hate groups, fought for the abolition of corporal punishment in public schools, and applied for equal representation when religious installations are placed on public property. Anyway, the long and short of it is the Satanic Temple are the good guys, air quotes, and the Church of Satan kind of suck. So if you're wondering which to support, it's Satanic Temple all the way. If you go to their website, thesatanictemple.com, there's a section on the website comparing the Church of Satan versus Satanic Temple and spells out their differences in exhaustive detail, which would not make for compelling radio content, but it is an interesting read and kind of goes into a lot of detail. But some of the downsides of the Church of Satan, even though they're older, they're kind of into social Darwinism and eugenics and just a whole lot of not so great stuff. Again, the whole Randian aspect of things, the libertarianism, is not my cup of tea. But Satanic Temple, like I said, in opposition to all of that, and that's why I like them, and that's why they're better. Anyway, that's just my 2 cents. I'm not a member of either organization. I'm actually a member of the American Humanist Association, but I do view the Satanic Temple as allies in the struggle for secularism.
Okay, well, an important disclaimer at the end there from John, as I told you, not a member of either organization. Not that that would stop anybody from framing the show as being pro-Satanist now, but now we at least understand how he comes to understand so much about the differences, is that occasionally the Satanic Temple shows up. I guess I view them, I don't know how serious they are as a religion. And although the tenets of the religion, such as were explained there, are like, why couldn't we all get along with such basic premises for a religion? They don't sound that outrageous at all. And I don't know. I mean, I've made no scientific inquiry into the nature of Satan, such that a satanic temple would make any particular sense to me one way or another. But Yeah, I get the sense that I guess we're talking about the Satanic Temple people when we start to see people show up and make civil rights protests on behalf of, when they try to dictate some sort of role for religious organizations in public life, and then they show up and say, we're a religion, and we have a name in our religion that you will be naturally loath to include in your supposedly open scheme here. Oh, it's not just about Christians. Any religion would be welcome, except, although these days, very often the conservative Republican types are much more open and willing to say, we don't mean Muslims or Jews or anybody else, really, or even certain kinds of Christians, for instance, would be excluded anyway. But, those are the people that I'm used to seeing making the civil rights cases. And it might be of interest for them to fight in one like this as well. And I guess that's how John comes to know them, too. All right. Well, let's see. I thought that was an important clarification, just like the clarification about the Star Trek shirts and what color they are and who really dies and who doesn't. And yes, I was informed, I guess, also over the weekend that the origin of that story, the photo of the Blue Origin crew, including William Shatner, were in fact all dressed in blue uniforms, as you might expect on Blue Origin, and that the one of them, him wearing a yellow shirt and red for the others, was a Photoshop and a joke. So now we're up to speed on all of those things. Okay, let's see. Other things that happened over the weekend that I guess I don't know if I'll spend it. I probably won't spend any time discussing this one. If you were inclined to read it over the weekend, you probably have heard all you need to hear. And even if you didn't read it over the weekend, you probably know the gist of things, but very much widely discussed and currently controversial. Over the weekend was the New York Times report on the January 6th insurrection. 90 Seconds of Rage was the name of their interactive presentation article. Just, I guess, profiling the people involved in one particular skirmish, the late afternoon skirmish on the Capitol grounds, and the people who were involved in it, and the violence that they perpetrated against the police there and others. And I don't know. I didn't read much of it, but I watched a lot of reaction to it over the weekend, and it apparently comes highly recommended in terms of reading material for from the weekend. 90 Seconds of Rage. Let's see, other things of interest too, and here we may want to share this one, was something from the LA Times. Now, I run the risk of not being able to access it the second time. I knew that was going to happen. They give you one shot at reading the damn article. However, I think and I thought about just leaving the tab with it open all weekend, but I ended up having to shut the computer down. But I do have it in Pocket, and we can read the Pocket version of it. Sometimes a little weirdly formatted, but a column in the LA Times, Jackie Calmes, is that right? Calmes. But widely distributed and commented upon, a column entitled "Why Journalists Are Failing the Public with Both Siderism in Political Coverage." And I guess I was surprised at how widely it was shared, given how I think it's consensus among our listenership and among my Twitter circle, although, my Twitter circle expanded a little bit over the weekend too, that this is the case, that journalists are failing with both siderism. And I think people probably have their guesses as to why. But everyone was so high on the version offered by Jackie Calmes here that I thought I might read it for myself and share it with you along with my own first view of it. American politics has changed dramatically since my post-Watergate generation of journalists began covering the story. Political journalism hasn't kept up. For years, it was easy to cover, quote, both sides, Republicans and Democrats, as worthy or as equally worthy and blameworthy partners in democracy. While we reporters had come of age as witnesses to the unprecedented resignation of a Republican president who'd tried to corrupt the institutions of government to effect an election, imagine. What remained was a Republican Party still capable of a creditable role in a healthy two-party system. After all, Richard Nixon was forced to resign when congressional leaders of his party began abandoning him. Again, imagine that, Kevin McCarthy. Now, when reporters or pundits use the words both sides in regard to some political problem, I stop reading or listening. Yeah, go ahead. Go for it. I'm with you on that. I started to chafe at false equivalence a quarter century ago. That is to say, before it was cool. As a congressional reporter amid Newt Gingrich's Republican Revolution. Guess what? I was cool then too. That is pretty amazing. So we were both too cool. Anyway, one party, his, the Republicans, was demonstrably more responsible for the nasty divisiveness, government gridlock, and norm busting. Yet journalistic pressure to produce seemingly balanced stories, pressure both ingrained and imposed by editors, prevented reporters from sufficiently reflecting the new truth. By 2012, as President Obama dealt with the willful obstructionists, conspiracists, and racists of an increasingly radicalized Republican Party, political scientists and long-respected Washington watchers Thomas Mann and Norm Ornstein, Thomas E. Mann and Norman J. Ornstein, put the onus for the dysfunction squarely on the GOP in their provocative book, It's Even Worse Than It Looks. Significantly, they implicated journalists. A balanced treatment of an unbalanced phenomenon is a distortion of reality and a disservice to your consumers. That being a quote, I guess, from their book. The ascension of Donald Trump 4 years later should not have been such a surprise. With his continued hold on the Republican Party in the Biden era, Mann and Ornstein's admonition is truer than ever. Yes, it's critical for political journalists to remain fair and balanced, in contrast with the right-wing network that cynically co-opted those adjectives. And yes, variations on the word lie justifiably made it into the mainstream, something I never thought I'd see, let alone write, to describe what comes out of Trump's mouth whenever his lips move. Sadly, that was progress. I have to just pause for a second here. I meant to pause a minute ago when I read that line. Yes, it's critical for political journalists to remain fair and balanced, in contrast with the right-wing network that cynically co-opted those adjectives. It suddenly sort of occurred to me, or maybe it's occurred to me before. I don't know. Now it feels familiar. But that statement that they co-opted the adjectives, they really did, and I'm sure it was consciously done, knowing that they weren't going to be fair and balanced. And I don't know, it just struck me how interesting that was as a parallel to Trump's co-opting of the phrase fake news, that pre-existed his use for it, and it was largely used as as a accurate description of these fly-by-night internet operations that posed as genuine news sources and made every attempt to look like a genuine local news source, but just simply generated false stories and fake news and put them in formats that made them look like real news so that they would be shared on Facebook, where they didn't, they were unprepared for dealing with that phenomenon. And then we found out they also didn't care about dealing with that phenomenon either. They only cared about looking like they were going to. Anyway, I just thought that was an interesting parallel, right? Well, what we should do here is we'll say we're fair and balanced when we're, in reality, we know we're going to try very hard not to be fair and balanced. We're going to push the Republican right-wing line, but under the brand of fair and balanced. We report, you decide, and everyone will see those things and say that must be what's going on, and therefore the right-wing news must in fact be the fair and balanced truth of it, and everybody else is the one that's unfair and unbalanced. I mean, it says fair and balanced right on the box, for God's sake. Anyway, back to the article itself. So, yes, sadly, it was progress. We have to regard it as progress for variations of the word lie making it into the mainstream. Yet, now that Trump is no longer president and his words no longer can fire senior officials, move troops, or launch bombs, his unhinged utterances go largely uncovered, for better and worse. That's a good way of putting it. Better, that is to say better for everyone's mental health. Worse, because he is the favorite to be the Republicans' 2024 nominee and perhaps president again, and still commands his party, enabled by his sycophants in Congress, state capitals, and thousands of local public offices. Attention must be paid to that aspect of it anyway. To the extent, then, that journalists and pundits focus critically on President Biden and Democrats and give short shrift to Republican obstructions, as if the cancer of Trumpism was in remission, if not cured, that indeed distorts reality and disserves readers, listeners, and viewers. Democracy is literally at stake. As Republicans block federal voting rights legislation, those in red states continue to challenge the 2020 votes for Biden, but not their own, by the way, pass laws to suppress future votes in ways disadvantageous to Democrats, gerrymander legislative districts, and replace nonpartisan election overseers with partisan ones. In Congress, the Democrats' disarray, to use a favorite alliterative phrase of journalists, is real and merits dissection, but it must be said that it owes much to the fact that Democrats, with their minimal House and Senate majorities, can't count on a single Republican vote for most legislation, while one Republican senator can routinely block action with a filibuster. Meanwhile, the scrapping between liberals such as Senator Bernie Sanders of Vermont and moderate Democratic holdouts Senators Joe Manchin III, did you know he was the third? Should call him Trey Manchin. Joe Manchin of West Virginia and Kyrsten Sinema of Arizona over potentially transformative domestic spending proposals reflects the normal debate process. Numerous news reports suggest that Biden is politically liable for the persistence of COVID-19. Yet many are silent on Republicans' opposition to his efforts promoting vaccines and masks, and the not coincidental fact that the rates of hospitalizations and deaths are highest in red states. Trumpists on social media seem to gloat over high case numbers. COVID is raging out of control, Trump himself said in an anti-Biden statement Wednesday. Do you miss me yet? Of course not. Why would anybody miss you? It was raging even worse and further out of control when you were here. All you have to really do is look at the charts. The literal peak of everything COVID-related in the United States came as you had done as your term was winding down, so that, the most damage you could possibly do cumulatively would have come right at the last minute of your term in office. And guess what? That's where the peak was. So there's the answer to your question. Do you miss me yet? I'm sorry COVID missed you, but that's about it. This is a Republican Party that is not serious about governing or addressing the nation's actual problems, as opposed to faux ones like critical race theory. There we are. Healthcare costs, childcare, climate change, income inequality, you name it. Republicans don't even acknowledge the problems, let alone propose solutions. Statewide candidates from Nevada to Virginia, echo Trump in claiming that addressing non-existent election fraud is, as he put it in another statement on Wednesday, the single most important thing for Republicans to do. That reminds me again, back in the Virginia mode here, as they were saying, as we remarked with Greg, the surprise of the pundits at finding out that people were actually motivated to vote against Youngkin because of his connection to Trump, and that the usual transportation, education, yada yada issues were not top of mind for early voters in the contest. And I just wanted to say, by the way, kitchen table, something, kitchen table, right? Anyway, this all comes as a big surprise to Abigail Spanberger, I guess. but not the rest of us. All right, got a minute or two to wrap up here before the top of the hour or bottom of the hour break, and I'm probably not going to make it, but let's continue on. Republicans in Congress scandalously opposed a bipartisan commission to investigate the January 6th insurrection, which threatened them as well as our democracy. They won't support a must-pass increase in the nation's debt limit, despite the trillions of debt that they and Trump piled up. Yet it was Senator Schumer of New York, the Democratic Majority Leader, who came in for pundits' rebuke last week when he lambasted Republicans for flirting with a default just after they'd allowed a temporary debt limit to pass.
Hi, I'm Scott Anderson, the guy that writes the daily summary for this show, Kagro in the Morning. Thank you to everyone that supports this show. Many of you send donations through PayPal, Patreon, Square Cash, Radio Public, and so on. Some of you write your own essays and send them in, or read articles with your own commentary. We appreciate it. Now, some of you are listening to this and thinking, I'd like to help, but isn't there something I could do that wouldn't require money or effort? Why, yes, there is. You can just like us. On Daily Kos, they call it the recommend button. YouTube has a thumbs up. There are hearts and likes and love buttons. Tap our love button. Tap our love button every day. Share our shows and summaries on Facebook and Twitter, YouTube and iTunes, Stitcher and Amazon. Most of these places allow you to write a review, so a sentence or two would be great. Recommend us to social media, or tell your friends to listen to the show. You aren't just helping us, you're helping them find their new favorite thing to listen to. You could change the world. So thank you in advance from me and everybody else in the world.
Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning show here on Networks Radio. Just watching the Twitter machines at the moment, keeping an eye on things. But yes, we left off in mid-paragraph here where we really shouldn't have. But the point that we were trying to make here in reading the LA Times piece, Republicans won't support a must-pass increase in the nation's debt limit. You remember that. They still won't. Despite trillions of debt that they and Trump piled up, yet it was Chuck Schumer, the Democratic Majority Leader, who came in for pundits' rebuke when he lambasted Republicans for flirting with the default just after they'd allowed a temporary debt limit measure to pass. The real point here was, what was he supposed to do? Celebrate the Republicans' supposed bipartisanship. It's bipartisanship in quotes here. Didn't say supposed, but celebrate the Republicans' quote bipartisanship in diffusing only until December the dynamite that they'd lit under the economy? Right, good question. On Saturday, the Senate's most senior Republican, it was last Saturday, not this immediate past Saturday, but Senator Charles Grassley gleefully accepted Trump's endorsement for re-election at a rally in Iowa where Trump repeatedly lied that he'd beaten Biden. The next day on Fox News Sunday, the second-ranking Republican in the House, Steve Scalise of Louisiana, repeatedly refused to say that the election was not stolen from Trump. Democrats can't be expected to deal with these guys like they're on the level, nor should journalists cover them as if they are. I know. We've all reached the same conclusion. But that's why this piece was so popular. In case you didn't get a chance to read it, or maybe you put it away to read later and then found out that you couldn't read it because paywall and you don't subscribe to the LA Times. Maybe you should subscribe to the LA Times. I don't know. But in case you wanted to hear it, now you have. So I don't know. I don't know what happens next, but you have heard it. Okay. Other tidbits, pieces of information, stories to share. There are several. This one I thought was of some interest as well. Picked up by a couple of outlets. I went back to this source, Business Insider, for this news. Oh, but I've reached my 5-article limit on this too, which I guess 5 articles means I probably should be thinking about subscribing to something like that. Anyway, let me go back to the pocket version of this one too. We haven't discussed this because it's been kind of a conservative lunatic cause celeb, which we're usually not interested in until it breaks out into wider circulation. But maybe you've heard about it. But the issue is the court-martialing of Lieutenant Colonel Stuart Scheller, about whom I know next to nothing. But, there's a linked article here. And, but of course it's from Business Insider, so I got to go into the pocket version to read it. But the basics of the story here is that this is a Marine officer, currently, active duty Marine officer, being court-martialed after his viral video criticizing top military leaders for Afghanistan failures was, widely viewed. And I don't know anything about the case per se, but I know that Matt Gaetz has been loud and vocal about saying, we should not be court-martialing him, et cetera, because something free speech. But of course, as an active duty member of the military, you're bound by different rules and under different restrictions. And he knew that when he did it, which is why he actually pled guilty in his court-martial. And so, anyway, we're at the stage where he's now being sentenced since he has pled guilty. And anyway, so the regular cast of lunatics in Congress decided they were going to help him out by offering themselves up as character witnesses for him. But of course, because he pled guilty, the only opportunity for them to offer their character evidence, and maybe really the only setting in which it would have been proper for them to offer character evidence anyway, in these proceedings, was in the sentencing stage. And so I think I originally saw people tweeting around, yes, right, it was our friend NYC Southpaw, who saw the initial reports in Stars and Stripes, I think, and they kind of, I don't know, they reported a very narrow slice of what was going on in a way that left questions about how in the world could this be being allowed to enter the record as testimony. Let me see if I can find that. Well, maybe I can find it afterwards and just give you the provenance of the whole thing. But as my recollection is that Southpaw was wondering about the report in Stars and Stripes about Marjorie Trader Greene, offering up her character witness testimony for Scheller, and that her testimony was essentially, she doesn't know him personally, and none of the three members of Congress, the others being Matt Gaetz, I think, and Louis Gohmert, who showed up on Zoom to give character witness testimony in the sentencing phase, none of them actually know Scheller. They were just there to say, well, we shouldn't be prosecuting him because we think he's right about Afghanistan. But that's not really character evidence, and also it's not helpful at sentencing really at all, but whatever. But Southpaw was wondering, how was it that we were even allowing evidence to enter into the record that Marjorie Trader Greene is standing there saying we should be impeaching Joe Biden for something, blah, blah, blah. Like, how is that, getting on the record? Why is that even happening? Under what conditions would there be room for a member of Congress who doesn't have anything to do with this case to just get on record in a court-martial saying this? And the answer is that it was happening in the sentencing phase. That's why we're hearing from people who have nothing to do with the case per se. And as for the question of, well, why would her call for impeaching Biden be allowed on the record? The answer is it really wasn't. This Business Insider report, I think, lays things out. Georgia Representative Marjorie Trader, I'll say, Greene, repeatedly had her Zoom call muted at the sentencing of Lieutenant Colonel Stuart Scheller. He was pleading guilty for defying a gag order by publicly criticizing the U.S. withdrawal from Afghanistan. Scheller has pleaded guilty to 6 misdemeanor charges, including displaying contempt toward officials, disrespecting superior commissioned officers, and displaying conduct unbecoming an officer and a gentleman. Congresswoman Greene who also displayed conduct unbecoming an officer and a lady, I guess. But whatever. She appeared at the hearing to pledge her support for the Marine. Who cares? Pledge her support. Do you have anything to say that's relevant to the sentencing? No, I just want to yell things. So she did. She appeared at the hearing to pledge her support for the Marine, whose social media posts critical of the current and former U.S. government went viral. Colonel Glenn Hines, the military judge, ruling on Scheller's case, repeatedly cut her off. Hines said Green taking the opportunity to call for Biden's impeachment was irrelevant and therefore cut her stream, according to the Marine Times. She also added that the troops responsible for an Afghanistan drone strike that killed 10 civilians should be convicted of war crimes, the Independent reports. Okay. Green stated that she believes General Mark Milley, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff and the nation's top military officer, and Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin should be in court, rather than Scheller, for their actions within the withdrawal from Afghanistan. I cannot express how millions of Americans are outraged. Even she gets this wrong. I cannot express how millions of Americans are outraged. That is true. You have been unsuccessful in expressing it. And as a matter of fact, you won't be allowed to express it because we're turning off your Zoom. That's hilarious. But I cannot express how millions, you mean I cannot even express, or words cannot express how outraged millions of Americans are about, but that's how she says it. I cannot express how millions of Americans are outraged about military leadership. I believe it was right of him. Well, it wasn't. He's pleading guilty. Green told the hearing, according to the Daily Mail, I am outraged that none of the leaders are sitting in court right now being held accountable for their actions. We need accountability. 13 military members died needlessly. We abandoned U.S. citizens in Afghanistan. Yes, there needs to be accountability. Anyway, all of this got cut off. And it's right to stand up and say that. I just thought I'd throw that in there. She continued, but not anybody heard it. Green appeared as a character witness to stand in Scheller's defense, despite not knowing the Marine personally. Representative Louis Gohmert of Texas and, there's a different one, Ralph Norman. I thought Gates was in it. Gates was just saying that we should let him go, but he didn't show up as a character witness, which I think that probably was a wise decision considering that he's under investigation for child molestation, so maybe he's not a great character witness. Louis Gohmert, who's also not great, was there. Also, Ralph Norman of South Carolina appeared at the hearing. Neither of the three politicians personally knew Scheller. In his testimony, Norman compared Scheller to Eddie Gallagher, also not helpful, a Navy SEAL acquitted of murder for allegedly stabbing a wounded ISIS prisoner and taking pictures with the corpse. I got questions about that. I mean, there were some charges for which he was actually acquitted, but then there were others that he was convicted of and pardoned by Trump. So was murder one that he was actually acquitted of, or was he just pardoned? We'd have to check that. Gohmert slammed Milley, saying that he disrespected President Trump during the Lafayette Square controversy in Washington in June of 2020. That is to say, Milley actually doing, eventually, some part anyway, of the right thing and saying I shouldn't have participated in that stunt is something that Gohmert says, well, that should be court-martialed. Saying that he was wrong and correcting the record should be court-martialed. Anyway, it shouldn't, and even if it was, it wouldn't do anything for Scheller. All three Republicans testified about the outpouring of support that Scheller has received from the public, or one small slice of it anyway, saying that that was their motivation to testify for him, the Marine Times report. So there you go. But the real story here is that the judge wasn't having any of it, and Marjorie Taylor Greene was blabbing about something that didn't make any goddamn sense, and he shut off the audio, and then I guess eventually disconnected her. So NYC Southpaw, there's your answer. It started as character witness testimony in sentencing, where it would kind of maybe sort of make sense to have three members of Congress who otherwise have nothing to do with the case speak. But then when you get around to spewing nonsense about impeaching Joe Biden, not only was it not admitted as evidence, it wasn't even allowed to be played in the courtroom. The judge said, enough of that. Anyway, I thought that was funny. Also, over the weekend, there was news, I don't know whether I put it away or not, that Marjorie Taylor Greene and Matt Gaetz, who got together to start their own little super PAC of some kind to support their barnstorming tour around the country. Apparently that PAC is now basically flat broke. And I thought that was funny. I didn't put that in Pocket here, so I'll have to scroll through the Twitter feed. And you know how populated that was with nonsense over the weekend, so it might take some extra time. But we'll see if we can find you that article. Basically, they didn't raise nearly as much money as they thought they were going to. They think they're extremely popular, but they're only popular with a very narrow slice of idiot Americans. And they're pretty much tapped out, and they've been giving them money for a long time. And then they wasted all of that money, one, barnstorming around the country asking for more money, and two, paying the fundraising contractors that they hired to raise money for the PAC exorbitant fees, so that all the money was just going straight back out the door and not accumulating anywhere. So anyway, I'll find you that article if I can. But like I said, there's a number of other things occupying space in the timeline. But a lot of them actually are pretty interesting, and maybe we can make those the subject of some discussion as well. Let's see, I'm having difficulty finding that other one. But, dang. That's too bad, because it was funny. And anyway, I'll find it. And you probably don't even really need proof of that happening. It's just kind of an interesting note, and pretty much where you probably assumed their PAC's effort would end up. Dang. All right, well, not quite as easy to come up with, but at any rate, there were a number of other things that popped up in the Twitter feed that might be of some interest. But let me see what else is in Pocket that is worth sharing. Did see the Daily Beast reporting this, but then I traced their story back to one from the Tampa Bay Times, finally reporting on all of that missing data suppressed from Florida with regard to their actual COVID numbers. For 105 days, COVID's death toll in Florida counties went missing. We all know that that's the case. I've discussed it. I mentioned to you that for a long time, as I was doing the nightly numbers, Florida was simply not reporting how many people were contracting COVID and how many people were dying from it, so that we got this distorted picture of what was happening in maybe one of the hottest hot spots in the country during the Delta wave. Very costly and very dangerous thing to do. And the cynicism of it was really something spectacular. In fact, I think the Tampa Bay Times does a pretty good job dissecting it. The state and federal government could have shared the death toll in each county with the public, but didn't for some reason. And we got the reason for the federal government. Ian Hodgson, writing for the Tampa Bay Times, for 105 days this summer, while COVID-19 deaths soared across the state, Floridians had no idea how many of their neighbors were dying. The Florida Department of Health knows how many people are dying in each county, but stopped telling the public on June 4th. That's when state officials stopped releasing daily pandemic data, switching to weekly reports, and started withholding data once available to the public. Instead of including county deaths in its weekly reports, the state directed the public to find that information from the CDC. The CDC will have it. Go get it from them. We're not giving it to you. But the problem is that the CDC, where do they get their information? The CDC relied on Florida's online portal of COVID data, which the state also took down in June. And the CDC's tally of deaths for Florida went blank. The number of people dying in each Florida county went missing from June 4th through September 17th. Miscommunication has plagued the relationship between the state and federal agency since the start of the pandemic. Now that data is available and it shows how many people died in Tampa Bay, it's Tampa Bay Times reporting, as the Delta variant tore through the state, a total of 4,437 residents in Pinellas, Hillsborough, Pasco, Manatee, Polk, Hernando, and Citrus counties died over 4 months. My goodness. 1,000 a month in just those counties. That's an average of 36 Tampa Bay residents dying each day from COVID-related complications from June 5th to October 7th, according to the latest data. The data reveals how deadly the latest COVID wave has been in two of the region's smallest, most rural counties, Citrus and Hernando, rank third and fourth in deaths per 100,000 residents since June 5th. In other words, the most rural and probably the most Trumpy and the least densely populated. All the things that Jared Kushner said they could count on to kill more blue state people, more Democrats than Republicans, suddenly stood on its head. Oh, that's so wacky. I can't believe it came back to haunt them. It's another episode that illustrates how governments continue to hinder the public's understanding of the virus and its toll. The issues Florida has had with data displayed by CDC has caused great confusion and allowed misinformation to perpetuate in our state. Florida Department of Health spokesperson Wisam Corey wrote in an email to Tampa Bay Times. So why doesn't the state share that data directly with the public, just like it had been doing until June? The Department of Health, an agency with approximately 12,000 experts, including epidemiologists, is equipped to make decisions regarding the best and most understood data, Corey said. The University of South Florida virologist Dr. Michael Tang countered that response, that they are determining for us what is the best and most understood data is paternalistic and contrary to the idea of transparency in government. True. Last year, the Times reported that Florida leaders spent years whittling down the Department of Health to nearly 13,000 employees by 2019, leaving Florida with one of the lowest numbers of epidemiologists per residents in the country. The agency did not respond to a request for its current number of employees. When the pandemic started last year, the Florida Department of Health produced detailed daily reports about the toll COVID-19 was inflicting. The state also posted that data to a website that the CDC, public health experts, and media organizations like the Tampa Bay Times used to extract, analyze, and share information about the pandemic. But in June, Governor Ron DeSantis' office declared that the pandemic had receded to the point where daily reports were no longer necessary. The state also took down its COVID data website known as an online dashboard. And then, of course, the worst of the Delta virus wave hit, and then national media declared Ron DeSantis to have won the pandemic, but it was simply that he was hiding the loss. Take the L, we might have said. But he was hiding the losses and declared the winner of the pandemic, and they've never undone that, by the way. COVID-19 cases have significantly decreased over the past year as we have a less than 5% positivity rate, and our state is returning to normal with vaccines widely available throughout Florida, said the governor's press secretary, Christina Pushaw, in a June 3rd email announcing the change. Instead, state officials decided to issue weekly reports. They also chose to withhold information that had been public, including county-level vaccinations by race, age, and gender, infected patients and staff in long-term healthcare facilities, and infections among students and school staff. I wonder if that was important. The state replaced its daily release of data with a 9-page document of statistics that it posts online every Friday after 5 p.m., when no one can see it. The state no longer releases data to the public in a format that can be easily collected and analyzed. However, Florida still sends its data to the CDC, which relies on data from all 50 states to continually update an online COVID dashboard that the public can access. The end result is that Florida's COVID data is harder to come by since June 4th, and it is the only state that releases data once a week. It releases less information to the public than it once did. It releases data in a way that makes it harder to access and analyze, and Florida leaves it to an outside agency, the CDC, to publicize data that it won't. The same month that Florida officials changed the data policy, the highly transmissible Delta variant emerged and infections took off again. Wow. Florida went from averaging about 1,000 infections a day at the start of June to more than 21,000 a day by August. Florida averaged a peak of 372 deaths a day on September 1st. State officials have repeatedly defended the weekly reports, saying daily spikes in cases and deaths can be misinterpreted. No, they can also be correctly interpreted, but they can't be interpreted at all if you don't give them. To be fair, trends are more important than daily numbers, which can be skewed for any number of reasons, said Tang in response to the state. But reporting data in weekly blocks isn't the best way of illustrating trends. As cases and deaths climbed this past summer, state officials said they will not switch back to daily reports or share previously available data. Instead, they told journalists and researchers that data requests should go through the CDC. Ask the feds. But for more than 3 months, the CDC dashboard showed 0 new fatalities in Florida's counties, and that's because the CDC was still trying to pull data from the state's defunct online dashboard. The CDC, however, was also receiving that data from the state via another avenue, because they just didn't know it. When the pandemic started in March of 2020, the CDC requested that the state transmit its daily COVID data to the federal government. When Florida officials took down the dashboard 15 months later, in June of 21, the CDC did not adjust and utilize the other source of data from the state. So they said, we weren't hiding it. We were just not telling you where we were giving it to you. The Florida Department of Health notified the CDC. I guess they did. I told them that. But CDC didn't adjust. That's bad. Did notify the CDC about the issue on September 3rd, a couple months later, according to emails obtained by the Times. But it still took days for the federal agency to start posting how many people were dying in each county. The episode highlights a common problem during the pandemic that different governments report different data in different ways, said Beth Blower, executive director of Centers for Civic Impact at Johns Hopkins University. This is an indication of why there needs to be standards that compel reporting. Without these standards, local and state governments have to improvise. That creates problems when federal agencies try to aggregate data from different local governments. There was absolutely room for the CDC or other federal leadership to articulate exactly how counties and states should be reporting COVID cases and deaths and hospitalizations, and that didn't happen. When the Times asked the CDC why county deaths were missing from its dashboard, federal officials blamed the state health department for not providing that data. However, the state provided emails to the Times that show that it has been transmitting data to the CDC since last year. CDC officials did not respond to the Times' request to respond to the state's assertions. Anyway, it's not just the state and federal governments that have failed to tell Floridians how many people were dying in their counties. Tampa Bay's local governments aren't reporting to the public either. The Pinellas County Commission holds weekly calls with state health officials to get briefed on COVID-19. Each week, the commissioners learn how many people are dying in Pinellas, said Assistant County Administrator Lourdes Benedict in a statement to the Times. However, county officials are not posting that data to Pinellas' own COVID dashboard. Deaths are a lagging indicator of a pandemic severity, Benedict said. That's true, but it doesn't mean you don't report them. Unlike positivity rates and case counts, which are more real-time indicators. The Hillsborough County Commission receives regular COVID-19 updates from Emergency Management Director Timothy Dudley Jr., but his reports don't include local deaths. County officials say they need more time to answer a query from the Times about whether it receives those numbers from the state. Well, they continue to go county by county here, and they all have excuses as to why they're just not sharing any of that information. But don't worry about it. He's still the winner of the pandemic, according to, who was it? Politico that said that? Yeah, probably time for them to revisit and retract that. Not that I expect them to actually do something like that. Anyway, almost about out of time here on the show today, and time in just a few to turn it over to Justice Putnam for the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. coming up next right here on Netroots Radio, of course. Things that we still might want to get to. Perhaps we could give you, we got a local story here that's local/national. The controversies before the Loudoun County School Board continue to get national attention because, of course, national Republican political operatives live here in Loudoun County, posing as just concerned parents. They continue to make trouble, but on the masking and CRT fronts, but also they have a new in that they're hoping they can use to leverage some impact on the gubernatorial race now coming to a close. Perhaps we can catch up on some of those things. And, of course, all the smaller bore but still interesting tidbits that exist in my Twitter stream alongside all of the noise from the weekend. Anyway, if there's anything we haven't gotten to here on the show, well, chances are that Justice Putnam has it on his schedule for today's West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Let's see what he's got on tap. Colonel Vindeman noted that Trump has not been held accountable for his attempts to steal the 2020 presidential election, and he should suffer the consequences. I'll agree with the Colonel on that one. Also, in the news today, Bitcoin mining power plants raise the ire of environmentalists, as they should.
You have been listening to Kagro in the Morning with David Waldman.
More, of course, here on the agenda. The aging South Texas water system meets a growing population, and at least 13 auto safety rules are years overdue. What else has he got for you? There's more. University of Tennessee at Knoxville has offered to reinstate a tenured professor who was acquitted of ties to China. Stay tuned for more next.